Hi, I'm Roger Grant, and like many people here in this room, Aunt Helen was my aunt. So if you called her Aunt Helen, let's see a hand raised, please. Okay, so I'm among some tremendous company here. Unlike so many of the folks here, I actually live here in Calgary. And so one of the most privileged things for me was to be able to visit Aunt Helen just a week before the time for her to depart. And at that time, I shared with her the first part of a poem that I'm about to read to you. And now those of you who are in the family, have been talking about the good things about the Grant family. Well, this is Roger's poetry, so it fits in the other category. So for those of you who aren't part of the family, thanks for just bearing with it, just like the way that my family members do. So here we go. And this is the first part I had for Aunt Helen, and I've completed the remainder of it since. Aunt Helen has seen much in her long years of life. She's been a sister, a mother, a grandma, and a wife. She's been surrounded by family since her February birth date. To me, she's a true aunt. To others, she's great or great-great. Her first years were in Bowden. She grew up on a farm and gently formed a demeanor, usually free from alarm. Her father said yes or no. He was a man of few maybes. Her mother was kind and never seemed to stop having babies. Brothers Gil, Charlie Dewar, Les, Al, and Fred were all Borna. And there was no shortage of sisters with Ethel, Rose, Mary, Mavis, and Lorna. There were many mouths to feed as the family grew. In the winter, she turned 7. There was a terrible flu. Everyone was deathly ill, trapped in bed, feeling quite gnarly. All except for Helen, that is, and the ever-valiant Charlie. They were the most able-bodied, so theirs was the job, to brave the cruel cold, to get milk for them all. They bundled up in their woolies and bits made of yarns. With lantern in hand, the youngsters trudged out to the barn. In the shivering cold and her tummy all aflutter, Helen reached out her small hands to pull milk from the udder. After much squeezing from a gentle brown cow, came a pailful of milk for the babies crying, "Now!" Although at the time the ordeal felt cataclysmic, Helen emerged triumphant over the Spanish flu epidemic. Over 97 years, there have been many changes, of course. Early on, the only way into town was on the back of a horse. But then came the day, dust rose from afar. Along the dirt road came an elegant motor car. This is a true story, by the way. Helen and Ethel were amazed, as you might guess, to see a swift carriage that was indeed horseless. The two sisters knew little about Chevys or Fords, but they thought it would be grand to ride the running boards. And they did. Helen was curious. She had an ever-active mind. She wanted to voyage to wherever the golden sun shined. But farm life was busy with chores and meals to cook. So her travels took place between the covers of a book. Reading took her many places, to Paris and the Louvre. She read every book in Bowden. So the family just would have to move. So up went the routes for the clan of Gilbert and Mary. They loaded up the truck and headed for Calgary. It was a bustling big city with so much delight, like outhouses in the house, and Mr. Edison's lights. Moving to the city, her father started a new line of work. The CPR job came with a wonderful perk. The whole family could get on the train and go to sightseeing. The best part of all, the tickets were free. On her first voyage west with the big family throng, her heart enthralled by the mountains, she burst into song. But that concert was outside and private on that fine afternoon. She could always carry herself well, but not always a tune. Soon her school days were done. They went by in a blur. In the 30s, she got a job with a comptometer. All was not dull in the dull days of the Depression. There was a younger fellow from Brockett who made quite an impression. Her pulse rate would quicken, her heart came alive when walking to work with the young man named Clive. After a few years of courting and saving up money, finally, Helen would marry her honey. At big family dinners, Clive would wear his best clothes and seemed always to want more potatoes. The young couple had a wee house just south of 16th Avenue, a bungalow where the family grew. First came concise Helen, who never grew far off the floor. Why? Well, for his first 7 years, his bed was a drawer. Soon came a daughter who many would adore, energetic, vivacious. Need I say more? Then a boy who balked at his sister being boss, the genius of a lad, his name was Ross. Next, could it be a teaser? Oh yes, very. Roseanne in the middle, first name Mary. Finally, Gail was so much talentueux to parler français at the cordon bleu. Then the family grew with spouses John, Ginny, and Ruth, and eventually 7 grandchildren. I tell you the truth. Philip, Phoebe, David, Debbie joined the next generation. The rest of the grandchildren have no alliteration. Connor and Aaron, Helen would always applaud. And last and not least, the irrepressible Maud. Today, we remember a life of warmth and aging with grace. I recall her hospitality and the smile on her face. Helen had a giving heart. She helped each of us thrive. We thank God for the gift of Helen in our lives.